So once again, welcome to the Unshakable Foundation meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with great pleasure and lots of gratitude that we welcome Gideon E, who has very kindly at the last minute come to share his experience relating to our 12-step program of recovery for up to about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for the Q&A portion of the meeting. And with that, it's over to you, Gideon. Thank you, brother.
Hi, Gideon, Addict. Yeah, thanks, Isaac, for that lovely introduction and everyone for coming and making it a meeting, whether you're doing service or not, whether it's your first few days in, whether you wanted to come onto this meeting or not. I'm glad you're here. Because I'm glad I'm here. I think I jumped on, I got last minute asked to do some service to help out with this meeting, which I sometimes do. And I thought, how brilliant is this? I get to sit in my front room. And that's my service done for the day. I get to help other people out while I'm sort of like just checking a few messages on the back of my PC, nice and easy. And then I get a last minute message saying, would you be willing to share on a meeting that I hold great respect to, because it's played a part in my recovery, as is Isaac sat over there. He's my sponsor. And so suddenly I'm overwhelmed with fear. It's that thing. I message him. I say, sure, that's terrifying, but sure, 100%. And he just says, he's got everything. And I only have one response to that today, and that's yeah, it's everything. I don't have anything else I can say. So here I am. It's still extremely bizarre to me that like words coming out of my mouth and relaying, not only that they might actually relay my experience with some coherence, but that might actually be helpful to people. I don't really feel like throughout a lot of my life I did a lot of thinking around how it was that I was affecting other people. Now, well, now I've realized that actually it was the thinking about how it was that I'd affect people that caused me the problem, and that's taken me this process. But yeah, I suppose just to sort of settle anyone in and qualify for a moment for anyone who's struggling and thinking, why am I here? All I want to do is stop using. I am someone who grew up not expecting to be sat in this room, to be someone that would become a daily drug user, a daily drinker from the start of my day to the end of my day on a daily basis. I did not expect that. I remember in secondary school when I first saw people sort of smoking, thinking, yeah, I'm never going to do that, never going to do that. I even sort of like pointing and laughing and taking the piss and just thinking, there's no way on this planet that I'm going to be like that. A lot changed for me in a short space of time when I was young, and I think began to uncover things I hadn't realized before. I faced a little bit of trauma, which is completely unrelated to the problem that I suffered with, or discovered that I suffered with. And then I moved across the country on a completely new setting to the one that I'd been brought up and anything that I was used to before, and realized that didn't realize, more to the point, that I had to find some way of feeling comfortable with who I was and where I was and who I was around. And what that looked like was a lot of lies. I think dishonesty as a key theme for me is a big part of my journey in this, and that will be discovered more and more as I speak, I guess, because for me, what this process has actually been is about uncovering layers that I didn't even realize were there, realizing that I was in denial about a lot of things, and really sort of working out that like I don't even have the ability of myself to be truthful to myself. That has to be given to me through my experience and through the open-mindedness of the idea that I might just be wrong about a few things. So I'm going to start with where that dishonesty started for me. I can remember just one example that I tend to bring up of when I was a child, and I don't remember what had happened or if anything had sparked this particular occasion, but I remember running into my mum's room tears flooding down my face. I'm in absolute pieces. I'm an emotional wreck. I'm having a complete tantrum. I must have been about 6 or 7 years old, and I'm begging on my knees. I'm telling her I'm being bullied at school. I can't go back into school. There's absolutely no way I can go back into school because I can't face those people. Everything there is completely horrible. I'm being bullied. They're calling me names. They're calling me this. They're calling me that. That's cool. She's there. She's coddling me. She's saying it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. And yeah, it got to the point where she contacted the school. I had several meetings with the different teachers. They were trying to work out what was going on and who it was that was bullying me, all the way up until the point I was in the head teacher's office and he had a list of every person in the years above me, going through each person saying, is it this person who's bullying you? Is it this person who's bullying you? Is it this person's bullying? And it was none of them. Like no one had been bullying me. I was absolutely fine at school. I'd had no problem with any other students and I'd had no problem with any of the other teachers. But for me, from that point onwards, I'd settled a way of coping with life that included me being dishonest to get some kind of emotional response from other people. Now, I don't know if that had come in before, but it definitely set a pattern for the rest of my life moving forward. Yeah, sympathy. Sympathy was a big thing for me. If I could get a bit of sympathy from someone as a kid, and then that definitely worked. But when I found out that I was going to be moving across the country, I remember that with the way things have been going, things had started to feel as though they weren't just. I just started to feel, I guess, uncomfortable, and finding out that I was going to be able to reinvent myself, as it were, and really play on this was something that I was keen to do. And I remember being told that we were going to be moving across the country, and I've looked over, my sister's crying because I'm going to be leaving her, and my mum's crying, and my grandparents are crying. And in my head, I'm just thinking, this is great. This is great. I can do this again, and I can restart. And what I was thinking was, I'm going to find whoever it was that partied. I was going to find whoever it was that partied. I was going to find whoever it was that was taking drugs, that was smoking, that was drinking. I was going to find out what they did and how, and I was going to replicate that. Now the thing was like, you know, I was a short ginger kid with freckles, glasses. My name was Gideon. I had countless allergies. Like I didn't stand much of a chance in these kind of settings. But I had this tool of being able to lie and kind of connive my way into situations. And ultimately, like my experience has always been that people found me funny enough to, especially when I was getting high, found me funny enough to kind of like look out for me, I suppose. And it was definitely worth having me around, I suppose, because of that. So I got to Sheffield. I moved up north, which I now call my home. I moved up there, and yeah, I honestly can't even really recall what happened. I just know what happened in such a quick space of time. I know I picked up a joint. 2 weeks later, I was smoking a joint every day. And then a few months later, I was picking it up for my own and doing that alone. And then the drink came in a few months later, and it was exactly the same. And then from there, it was the coke and lots of other things that sort of came in. And I would then manipulate and move things around in order to make sure that I would have things on my own, because it was about what I felt like and not about what anyone else felt like. It wasn't about, for me, my personal experience, and it's part of what's brought my journey's brought me to here now rather than anywhere else, is that like it was about how I felt and not about connecting to people. It was about being able to connect with myself for just a moment. And it's only, you know, it's worth me saying that like all of this has only come in retrospect through working the steps and getting connected to the power that I have, is because with the honesty that I've been given, I'm able to look back on myself and realize what it was that I was aiming for, which was just some kind of peace, some kind of quiet mind, I suppose, or the ability to deal with the way that the world worked. To start with, that's what it was. To start with, I wanted to change the way that I feel. At some point, and I don't know when, it overtook and the drugs had control. There was no way I could tell you. I could give you hundreds of examples where I've gone out to use to drink, or I've stayed in to use and to drink, in which it had absolutely nothing to do with how I felt, but it just happened. It just happened, and I believe today was going to be talked about more about alcoholism. And if I'm going through the book with someone else, it's definitely one of my favorite chapters because my brain's way of thinking reeks of the analogies in the book. Absolutely reeks. So yeah, I guess I picked up at the age of 14, put it down about 9 years later at the age of 23, which for me was a really lucky experience because the way that my using looked was only getting worse rapidly. And it was only going to take me in one place. And yeah, I think like I got introduced to the 12 steps a few years before this stuff really worked. And for anyone new, this stuff really works. If you're looking for a solution to the problem of which you can't stop when you start, and when you can stop, you can't stay stopped, this thing really works and does so comfortably. Let me tell you that my life today is actually comfortable. Like I enjoy my life. My life looks now like it did like I thought it would when I was fantasizing about it, when I was drinking and using, when I wanted control. And all I've had to do is let go of control of that. So if anything else I say today in this last minute share makes absolutely no sense, you completely can't relate to it, you need to know that that is true because that has been my experience of this thing, and I've spent a lot of time around other people who share that experience of what this stuff can do for you. So yeah, I got introduced to the steps when I was around 21. I was in a fairly abusive relationship, and this person had been in and out of the rooms before and was quite sick at the time. And yeah, she got sober halfway through our relationship, and even though I don't know what I did was I used behind her back relentlessly as she went off to meetings. And she'd come back and tell me all about the 12 steps, and I'd look at it, and I remember feeling like if I was like just about enough intoxicated enough, she would talk about the steps, and I'd go, oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's something I could do. That's something I could do. And then when I'd come off of the drug, it would be the last thing on my mind. The only thing that would be on my mind was picking up the drug again. And this was all completely. She was. I don't know if she knew or not. To be honest, I've not had a chance to see her since, but it's interesting to me, this idea that like the only time I had any faith or confidence previously that I would be able to sort out what my problem would look like was while I was enough, like intoxicated enough. And then I'd normally kind of, because I couldn't stop once I'd started, you know, that thing of like there was a sweet spot, and each time I picked up, it got surpassed. Like there was no way I could stay in that sweet spot. I was desperately looking for that sweet spot. I was one of those who would have loved to have moderated and just been 20% pissed all the time, but I was never capable of doing it. But I was pass out drunk every night. Whether that be behind closed doors, which 90% of the time it was. But yeah, when I was in that sweet spot, the firm resolution, not necessarily not to drink again, but to find some kind of way of living that I would be able to cope with, was there. Because I think like if I look back, if I skip back, I can't tell you when it happened, but at some point, this fear, this way of living, I suppose the lies started to catch up with me. And I think like when I was about 19, I just have this vivid memory of spending each and every night staring in the mirror, telling myself how much I hated myself. I absolutely despised myself. And I'd look myself dead in the eye and see, I don't know what I saw looking back, but like it was me, but it wasn't me, you know, and whatever it was that I did see, I absolutely hated. And I got some kind of joy out of that, you know, some kind of like perverse comfort out of the fact that I had control over that. I think, I don't know, but all I know is that was the rhetoric, that was the dogma, that was all that was going through my head. And whether I was looking in front of the mirror or not, what began to happen was every other thought that I had during that day was how much I hated myself. And it was that casual, it was that, you know, true to me, that I didn't even give it any thought or any play. Like I didn't give it a second thought. It was just there. It was the first thought, if anything, you know. And I guess like, you know, what I can say between this dishonesty, which I can see from when I was a child, and this negative thinking, this sort of selfishness that that came about is like all of this was ways to control and stabilize how it was that I was feeling. And like I've said it before, I almost feel bad for my brain because it's done such a good job in trying to fix whatever it is that's going on for me. I feel like I was born on this planet trying to make sure that I get the full human experience. That's all my spirit desires, you know, beyond my thinking and beyond my feeling. I am something, and whatever that thing is, wants to get the full experience. And it's struggling to take it all in, to be honest. And my head's trying to make sure that like I am in control of that, because if I'm not in control, then what is in control? And yeah, drugs and alcohol did that for me, whatever it was, whether it was the lying, whether it was the self-hatred, whether it was making things feel better for whatever extent of time, it did that for a period of time. But then it didn't. And it definitely didn't for quite a while. My problem here as an addict, as an alcoholic, is that it's not that like the drugs stopped working, it was that I couldn't stop when they did. And not just that, I really wish there were times in my like last year of using where the magic formula that I was desperate to try and get together of different psychedelics and party drugs. Oh, if I'm just on the party drugs, I'm on this or on that, it will work. The magic formula worked 1 or 2 weekends in the space of a year of relentless using, and absolutely not wanting to be on this planet, and sprees that were bringing me close to death. And it was like, you know, I know what that year looked like now. But all I could think about before and after the sprees, where I got that magic formula on point, was what that would look like. My head will only show me what it looks like when my using goes well. And it never did. You know, it was just those 1 or 2 occasions. And what I had to face really was that lie, and I didn't have the ability through the way that I built up my way of thinking to face that lie with the truth myself. So I got introduced to the steps through someone else. I saw they got someone, they could get someone who I thought was pretty hopeless, sober. So I had an idea that like I could spend some time sober. And the consequences started getting really bad. You know, I think I was faced with an ultimatum. My mum, so I had been out of contact with my mum, and it got to a point where I needed to contact her. I wasn't going to have a roof over my head, and things were going to be looking really bad. And I called her, and she'd said, "Well, look, the only way that you're staying in my house is if we're locking you in the attic." And I've heard of this treatment center that does a day program online. It's the only thing I can afford, so we're locking you up there. And hopefully that'll work. And that's what I did. I went back, and I remember thinking, this girl that I was with at the time, she was saying, "It's not going to work, you know." I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "What? It's going to work. The 12 steps, they work, but it's not going to work how you want it to work. You want to go back home. You want to be fixed. It doesn't work like that, you know. You're not ready." And I remember hating her so much. She was like, "You're going to relapse at least 3 times." I remember, I hate that. You're wrong. I'll do this fearlessly and thoroughly. And just for anyone new, do this fearlessly and thoroughly. But there's so much more at play that I hadn't realized. So I went back. I went back to my mum's, and I did it fearlessly and thoroughly. But I was relapsing all the time. I remember like I was relapsing, and I got a sponsor in my local area. I went straight to meetings as advised by that treatment center. I got a sponsor. I started working the steps, and yeah, everything was going in one ear. I remember this like quite intense man saying, "Yeah, I'll sponsor you. Come with me. We're going to go to the pub and we'll start reading the book." I was like, "The pub, really? Like, can we go to the pub?" And he was like, "Yeah, we're going to the pub. That's all right with you, isn't it? You know, like if you've got your step 1, and we'll be fine. We'll sit here." And like theoretically now, seeing that would have been fine, but all I was thinking about was like, when's he going to leave? Because like, I might actually get a drink, and not being able to tell him. I think the point there is I wasn't able to tell him, not once, that I was having these feelings. I wasn't able to tell him that I wanted a drink, that I wanted to use. And then when I did pick up, I wasn't able to tell him I wasn't physically able to tell him that I had picked up that drink. Despite the internal rage and fear that I was feeling, I couldn't get the words out of my mouth. And when the only thing that I remember from that first bout of trying the steps, and I only got to step 3 by reading the book and not internally, right? Because this stuff has to hit my heart. The only thing I remember is that first bit in How It Works, where it says that it may not work if you're institutionally incapable of being honest. I just thought, that must be me. That must be me. And I remember I started to tell him a few days after I was relapsing, and he said, look, you know, I don't think this is where you're at. I don't think it's going to work. I still come to meetings, and I was like, oh, damn, okay, do you know what? And I just disappeared. I disappeared from anyone who had reached out to help me. And then it just seemed at that point in time, the loneliest place that I had been in. And I swore to myself that I wouldn't be there again. Because all the friends that I had built up based on lies after having rebuilt my life saw the place that drugs and alcohol had taken me to, saw the lies I was telling myself about recovery even, and to them, and they didn't want anything to do with someone who was just trying to prove themselves all the time, but like putting in no action whatsoever. So I'd lost all those friends these fair weather friends, and I'd lost these people in recovery, and I was completely alone. And all I could do was rely, all the tools at my disposal at that point were, and all that my brain had to do was to use, to drink, and to try desperately to scramble my way into getting some form of life together. Obviously, quickly, I lost another job. I lost somewhere to live. I was walking around the street, non-verbal, sort of waking up in strangers' house, being shouted at by people I didn't know, and you know, just all sorts was going on, and I thought, this can't be it. This can't be it. This can't be it. And I remember this is probably like one of many times that I did this, but I was absolute master at managing to tightly rebuild my life back together piece by piece, just about in absolute fear that I might not be anything. And as soon as it was starting to look slightly stable, I'd get horrifically bored of what the outcome of my life was, and I'd knock it straight back down again. And I desperately wouldn't want to, and I could see it coming. And it was almost like when I'd knocked down my life back down again, it was like not only could I see it coming, but I wanted it. I needed that level of interest. So despite having lost somewhere to live, I got a job, I got somewhere to live. And this job I was in for a year and a half, and in that time, my alcoholism was making. I'd put down the drugs. I thought the drugs are the problem. I'll put down the drugs, and then maybe I'll be able to keep a job, because I couldn't physically maintain a conversation on the drugs anymore. So there was no way I could do them at work anymore, and that was a big problem for me. I needed something to get me through work. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't looking for like going out and being able to. I needed something to get me through the day, because in the morning straight away I couldn't get out of bed without some kind of relief from my internal condition. That was the point that this took me to, every time without fail. And yet I was still unwilling to recognize that, completely unwilling to recognize that, because that would mean that you guys were right, and that I needed some kind of solution that I didn't yet have access to, because I wasn't honest enough. So my alcoholism had started getting bad enough to make me severely ill on the job, but I was drinking enough to kind of combat that and get through the day. And I was working in sales and customer service in telecoms, which is I wouldn't say cutthroat industry in the UK, but it's definitely one that suits my defects pretty well. I get to be dishonest, selfish, and self-seeking all day long. Drink or no drink, drug or no drug. So, but I think the thing is, I'd started getting really ill, and I just remember getting to this point where I was like, why, you know, now that I'm actually getting ill and I look worse, I was vain enough to kind of realize, well, I can start getting honest about this and telling people about it. So I was ringing up family and sort of saying like, look, I'm going to drink today. I'm going to drink today. And they're like, don't do it. You know, I don't want to speak to you if you're going to do it. And I had to try and get it across to someone that, like, for me, this was a big thing. but I had the ability now to tell you that I was going to do it. Not the ability to stop, but the ability to tell you that I was going to do it and that it was going to happen. Or like after it had happened, I was going to tell you it happened. And that caused a lot of havoc because people who previously had no idea that I was drinking and using as much as I was suddenly had a very good idea of how much it was that I was drinking and using. So I got pointed back to the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous, to which I got a new sponsor. I got straight in the steps and started to build a relationship with a power greater than myself. And it was good. It was good. It was good. By all intents and purposes, that was the best my life had looked at that point. I did 90 days in sobriety. I got to step 11. I built a good relationship with a kind and loving man who took me through the steps. He was armed with the facts about himself. He was recovered from this problem, and he had a life that I thought, yeah, I'd want a bit of that, you know. Got to step 11, and I'm off to go and make an amends with one of my old friends in Manchester, and something was getting at me. Something was getting at me, and I messaged my sponsor at the time. I say, look, I think I'm going to drink. And he says, well, have you done X, Y, and Z? And I think, well, I've kind of not done X, Y, and Z. And at that point in time, recovery for me looked like writing a gratitude list in the morning, doing my routine, closing my eyes for 10 minutes, saying the prayers that I was told to say, doing all the things that you get told to do, but not believing that they would work. Not believing that they would work. And generally, I can see it now. I've got a close friend in recovery up in Sheffield, and I remember having just got sober. He's now in the program, and we went out, and he was still drinking. He was just about to go to rehab, and I was sober. And now we're both sober. And when I came back into recovery, I rang him, and he was like, "Yeah, do you remember that time we went out, and it was just before I went to rehab? I can look back at that now, Gideon. You were uncomfortable. You were not happy." So I'd started to be able to save money, to hold down my job, to not be as ill as I was, because I'd got about 3 months sober, and I was able to talk as though everyone else was in the meetings to some degree, or at least I thought I was. I'm sure there's people who were recovered in those meetings thinking, what the heck is he on about? He hasn't got any of this behind him. But I was doing the action and reaping some of the rewards. And especially, like, one thing to say for me was starting to pray at that point in time was the best move I could have made. Whether or not I believed in what I was doing, that was the start of this process for me. The start of this ability to realize that there was something bigger than me. I just didn't think that, like, it was something that I'd have to trust in completely to get recovered from my drinking and my drug problem. Because over that course of that 3 months, what really happened was I just felt like I was missing out on something. Just 24/7, I'm missing out on something. What about this? What about that? What about this? And I'd send it over to my sponsor, like, what about this? What about that? What am I going to do about this thing? And he'd be like, well, have you done X, Y, and Z? And I'd say, well, I've done X, Y, and Z, but I didn't believe that it was going to get sorted through this thing. So I'd tell him I was doing X, Y, and Z, that I was praying, that I was meditating, that I was talking to other people, that I was showing up for myself and doing the opposite action to the way that I used to act. But I was working in a job where I was lying, cheating, being selfish, my relationships looked just the same as they had done my entire life. My way of thinking looked exactly the same way it had done my entire life. And I had no interest in changing it because I didn't see that I hadn't. Because the only way I knew something was real up until getting recovered through this program was if it was coming out of my mouth, then I knew it was real. If I'd said it to you, that was what was real. Do you know what I mean? Whether it was real to anyone else, I don't know. So yeah, from there, I was on step 11. I was going to make an amends with someone, and I'd messaged him and I said that I'd done the stuff, and I hadn't really done the stuff. And then I'm in a pub. I'm with an old friend. And I'm thinking, I'm not drinking here, which wasn't the plan, but I'm not drinking. I'm not gonna pick up a drink because I know what happens when I pick up a drink. I'm not gonna pick up a drink because I know what happens when I pick up a drink. And then suddenly I've got a drink in my hand and I've taken a sip. And then it's 3 days later and I want to die. Like, I want absolutely nothing to do with this planet anymore. and I'm completely baffled. How is this not worth? I'm absolutely raging. 6 months of pure depression. And then my brain tells me that maybe actually I'm not an addict. Maybe actually I'm not an alcoholic. So 6 months of depression and drinking and using every day until it was that my brain decided that maybe I'm not an addict, maybe I'm not an alcoholic. Maybe you just weren't selling the right drugs. Maybe if you were selling these drugs in this way, you'd be all right. And back comes the cycle again. And this job that I got that had saved me, I was going to lose this one. And I'd been through, I've been sacked from 6 different Nando's for gross misconduct. And I used to love flipping chickens on a daily basis. And I must be the only person who's gone through that. I used to get sacked from one Nando's, then I'd move to a different city, tell them that, you know, oh, I'm a new employee, get back on the system. It wouldn't get flagged up, and then I get sacked for gross misconduct again. I go to a different city, get hired at a different Nando's, and I used to just do that. But this was a new job, this was a different job, and I could see that was going as well. So with the state that I'd built in my head and this final layer of dishonesty that was sat with me, which was this idea that there must be some kind of way of getting some kind of peace and enjoyment in my life, because so far all the steps have done and all the meetings has done is restrict my life, or so I thought. So I thought, right, well, I've got to move again, number one. And maybe if I go back and I start trying to study or something like that. So I scrambled my life back together to move all of my stuff down across the country one more time, this time with no one behind me. There was no way that I had any kind of backing out of this situation. And I was extremely lucky to even get into this place that I'd got into. And when I did, it was about a month in, I don't think my drinking or using was quite as abusive as it had been in the months leading up to the point that I'd moved. I'd had some kind of relief from that, through the fact that I was in a new place, through the fact that I had no money, but it was creeping back in, and it was creeping back in fast. And I was starting to see things that I didn't want to see in creeping around the corners of my bedroom. I was starting to feel ways that I really didn't want to feel, but it was all too familiar, and I had no way of knowing how it was I was going to escape that. I had no way of knowing how it was I was going to escape that. And I'd been praying, I'd been praying since I'd started through these steps. I was praying, oh God, get me sober, get me sober, get me sober. Just, you know, like, I want to be sober, I want to be sober, I want to be all right, just make me feel all right, just make me feel all right. All of those sentences, they started with I want this, I need this, get me this, give me this, God, yeah. None of those things, they've all kind of been achieved now, I suppose, you know, make me feel all right, get me sober. But what, I wasn't ready for to open up that channel because I wasn't yet honest enough. So I was sat one random afternoon in that bedroom that I'd managed to get, surrounded by living with addicts, all using on a daily basis, using the drugs that I used. And I thought, you know what, like, this is never going to work. I can't be honest with myself. I had lots of ideas on one side of my head going a million miles an hour about how it was I was going to control my using. And the rest of my brain was telling me that it just didn't believe those ideas, but my heart believed the ideas. And I realized that. And so for the first time, what I did was I just prayed for honesty. I didn't pray for anything. I just prayed for honesty. I just admitted I was wrong. For the first time, I just admitted I was wrong. And when I did that, it was like a train hit me in the face. It was like a lightning bolt came down, but it didn't. It wasn't that dramatic. It wasn't that dramatic at all. But it was almost like in an instant, my whole way of thinking was reshaped, or given the opportunity to reshape there, because for the first time I was wrong. My head was wrong. And I knew it was the only time that I've let this program take me directly that far in the future, because for the first time I knew that I was always going to end up picking up again of my own power. I was always like, it was always going to be the case. I couldn't stop myself physically. And that if I wanted any chance to genuinely stop that, this program had to be everything. I had to offer up everything on the table. And my experience has been, since doing that, I have not ended up having to sacrifice anything um that I've needed to have provided in my life, and that's been a beautiful process. I felt like I had nothing in it, and in a moment I was restored with hope, and I got straight on my knees, and it got this overwhelming sensation which said, get to a meeting, call that guy that you've been given the number of, get straight through the steps. And that's exactly what I did. And by the time I got to step 4, it was the 3rd step 4 I'd written. I was on an absolute mission to find out what this fear looked like that I'd been living in, and how it was that I was going to get restored to enough sanity so that when the thought of drinking or using drugs came into my brain, I would have enough sanity to make sure I could make a conscious decision not to do that. And from there, I've been freed up. My whole life has grown. I found this power to do things which I could not do before, including sitting here in front of you or telling you some kind of coherent story. And I hope it has been relatively coherent. But yeah, I'll leave it there. So the idea that God is everything to me is everything. But when I think about how I was brought up a Christian, and in that sense, it was really easy for me to slip into this anthropomorphized idea that God had to be something that could control physically what I could do. And it made sense that it might look like a person. As I grew up and things changed, I don't know, the idea that there was something before everything existed, and that everything exists out of the same thing was pretty apparent. I think for me, this stuff has started working when I realized that there's lots of questions that I, Gideon, and us humans can't answer. And I understood that anyway, but to realize that there was one massive unanswered question in my life, which is why can't I stop when I pick up, and why is it I can't stay stopped, was really important, because when I realized that that was an unanswered question that I couldn't answer, I had to find some kind of power that could answer that. And when that question was resolved, it was apparent that this stuff is everything, that God is everything, that I can see things unfolding in the present, rather than thinking about what I think they should be. I don't know, I'm 24 years old. The universe has been around for billions and billions and billions of years. I don't know when it was I decided I should start trying to control everything. But it was, I'm guessing it was at a pretty young age, because I did a pretty good job of trying. And I think it doesn't really matter how old you are. I don't think anyone in here is a billion years old. So stop trying to figure it out, I'd say, and just like accept that we are all part of something. And for me, that was just being part of something. I didn't feel like I was ever a part of something. And the second I realized that, like it or not, I was a physical thing in this universe, I was a part of something. So God is everything, and I am part of everything. and I refuse for it to be any other way these days. You know, like I refuse for it to be any other way. You know, because yeah, unless reality is not real, then yeah. Sorry, I don't know why I went down there. Anyway, yeah, that's that.
Thank you so much, Gideon. Next, we have Hugh. Would you like to come in with your question, please?
Yeah, nice one. Yeah, just before I ask the question, can share, and like you really described that self-destructive thing, and I think like for me that was something when I realized how bad my disease was, when it was just anything, didn't matter about drugs and alcohol, it was just annihilate, just harm yourself, you know. So I picked up a lot from that, and also you're talking about dishonesty, and this ties into my question. You spoke about praying for the right, that change that you prayed to be honest, and how that changed you. And yeah, I feel sincerity in prayer is really important, and I try to do that. But I'm wondering if you have anything that you do now that um, helps you to align your prayers to the right thing that you need at that time, whether that is honesty or because like sometimes I don't know what I need to be praying about. So I'm just wondering your approach to that.
Yeah, great question. What a pleasure to be asked something like that. Because it's something that's changed my life, but it's also something that changes in itself for you, mate. Like I think like um the less I've made it about something physical I can get, the better. And that includes when I'm praying for other people. Like for me, it's like been really important to pray for other people, especially those that I'm resentful at. But like if I've, for me, this has been my experience like recently, and I'll tell you right now before I've opened my mouth on this meeting, this prayer went through my head about 300 times and out to God, which was just, I can't do this. I can't do this. Not, I can't do this, I won't do this. Just me, my head, I can't do this. Because if you're like me, Hugh, my experience has shown me that on my own power, it's gonna fail, or I'm at least gonna feel like it's failed, you know. So the less thinking about, so I can't do this, God do it. And that in that pause, in that moment, I'm willing to shift over that power. If you look at the serenity prayer, it's like, you know, just about the way that I perceive things, which is great. You know, I think it's always a trade-off. It's like, yeah, I get given these ways of thinking and these ways of seeing things so that I can be an example to what God's world would look like, to what God's world will look like to some degree. I will still fail that always. I am human. I'm not floating on a cloud. But to recognize that and to be able to shift that power over is where the beauty in this lies, because it means that I can live in this sort of spirit of forgiveness and be able to forgive others and work towards being a better version of myself and finding out what that is. You know, it's like in step 11, it's like all it's asking us to do is pray for knowledge of God's will for us, and not needing to go beyond that. So yeah, just all in the pause, all in the pause, all in the pause.
Great question. Thank you, Hugh. Next, we have Sue. Would you like to come in with your question?
Hi, Sue, grateful recovered alcoholic. Well, it's lovely to see you, Gideon. I've met you in Sheffield. And you talked about being on step 11 previously. So now you must have gone through step 12, and you're sponsoring now. Do you think that's made a massive difference to your recovery? And how does that look when you're working with others?
I think it's been the biggest sort of thing that's caused change in my recovery and caused growth in my recovery, because I get to see how it is that I've been, what I've been uncovered from, and then it's almost like I can start to hear the message that I should be hearing through myself. I'm going back through the steps at the moment. I'm on step 4 and it's taken me ages. I've also got a sponsor at the moment who's on step 4 and it's taken him ages. And this morning I messaged him to get cracking on his step 4, and I read that message and I thought, I've got something I've got to be doing here. You know what I mean? But it's nonetheless, like, it's actually a beautiful thing, because I've spent a lot of time trying to argue people into their step 1s who haven't got their step 1, and I think that's important, having been someone in this program without a step 1, as I've spent most of that share explaining. So but at the same time, to realize, to really give more and more control to God and to what this process is about, I've had to getting to see that change in people, and that change in people has never been anything about what I've done. Do you know, like when things have started to change for people, it's never come from me. I might have been there to witness, to experience it, or said something that's pointed them in the direction, but their action, seeing other people's, like God working in other people, I can see that more clearly than I can see in my own life. Like I sometimes say to my sponsor, I'm like, yeah, is that what's changed? Has anything changed? I don't know. It's like I need to know, I need to hear that, because sometimes I don't know myself, and yeah, it's a beautiful thing seeing that in other people, and I only hope for that to grow and to continue and to change, and God willing, and I know it will, you know, I really do. So yeah, it's probably the best part of it, to be honest. keeps me here. It gives me purpose. It's like after my step 5, when that channel was open, I really saw that my experience have given me this opportunity to be helpful, and it's not something I take lightly. Is that gift to be helpful, because I didn't realize what a gift that was before, and I didn't think I was able to do it. You know, like I tried desperately to do it, but every time I was being helpful to someone, I was normally resentful at them, and like just trying to get them to like me. And normally that meant that people I was resentful at started liking me, and that was way worse than just being resentful at them. You know what I mean? So yeah, yeah.
Thank you for your question, Sue. Great question. We've got one more in the chat that I'm going to read out before we close. What step, if any, have you encountered the most resistance with, and what did you do?
I think like for me, my previous attempts at the steps were consumed with denial. So there wasn't much resistance as much as there was a belligerent yes man sort of attitude that led me absolutely nowhere. And then this attempt where I'd been given this honesty, I was desperate. I was desperate to get out of the hell I was living in. I don't think that was resistance. I think I got really lucky to have an understanding of what this stuff does, to have started to build that relationship. But I think like for anyone new who's like facing resistance, like remember that still took me 3 years of trying the steps. Like I look at that as one process of unblocking, you know. So it's like if you're coming in and you're stuck on a step, trust that it will go, but you've got to keep like, you know, you've got to keep at it. You've got to keep talking to people about it, and start to probably, if people are telling you the same thing as something you're not letting go of, it's not them, you know. I think I got told, I think like now it's resistance with step 10, because that's the one where I have to look at myself in the moment, you know, and it's the one that really causes the most change and the most growth, which I absolutely love the benefits of step 10, but taking the effort to realize I'm wrong on a multiple times on a daily basis, that takes some courage, and courage that is well worth obtaining, but not courage I've had of my own power before. You know, it's like I always knew what the right thing to do was. So again, like with this thing of like me praying for honesty and then getting honest, it's like I knew I could have written down what good morals looked like and what the right thing to do was on a piece of paper my whole life, but I couldn't do the right thing. So if you're struggling with resistance on a particular step, and you know what the principle is, and people are telling you what it is you've got to do, but you can't do it, have you tried praying for that thing? And then giving it time and trying again and trying again and trying again, just till you get over that one little hurdle. Because I promise you, my experience has been that once I've got over that one little hurdle, it's not been difficult to go back over it again, until things grow. And when things grow, it is a bit harder, you know, like recovery, life grows, recovery, and then it's sort of like an exponential fluctuation. Two big words. Yeah, I think that's right. Not much resistance on my part these days.
Beautiful. Thank you for everybody who's asked a question, and thank you, Gideon, for taking the time to answer. This brings us to almost 9 p.m. UK time, which brings us to the end of question time, but not quite the end of the meeting.